Once upon a time, there was a prince, a movie prince. He was born into a film world, a British Hollywood.
There is no one like Jeremy Thomas.
He's the dream producer.
His history with amazing filmmakers is just incomparable.
You and I are driving somewhere over 4 or 5 days. Where are we headed and why?
There's a necessity to arrive in Cannes for the first day of the festival. We can look at some incredible places. We can find something special.
I look at the man in the car beside me. Who is he?
One of the things about Jeremy is that he's so rock and roll.
He didn't just get the funding for some of the most daring films of the last 40 years. They, in part, came from his imagination.
Independent spirit is a great thing to have in creativity. Sex is something that is very much involved in my cinema. There was a movement that was exposed to the hotbed of politics.
He's a pirate. We have to have people who shake it up and keep it fresh.
And the further you get away from the center, the more original the work is.
He's always living in the middle of the storm.
Mr. Thomas,
How are you?
how are you? Good, how are you?
I'm well.
I'm glad to hear it. Very nice. It's so great to meet you. May I just say,
Yeah.
you've had a hand in quite a few of my favorite films.
Well, I've been on the road. I've been just doing my job since I was 17. I've been working in the film business in different places. And I've been just doing my job, and now, of course, looking at the amount of films that I was involved with, it's completely nuts. I agree. But I've had a very enjoyable journey around the world with wonderful people making these films.
Well, your dad was a filmmaker, and
My dad was a film director. My uncle was a film director. They both were editors and then film directors after the Second World War. My uncle was 7 years younger. They both had made films. My father directed 40 films, including films with Bob Hope, Catherine Hepburn, and lots with Dirk Bogarde and Brigitte Bardot, and big stars, and was a very successful film director for the Rag organization principally. And then my uncle Gerald Thomas made a very long series of comedies called the Carry On films. And I grew up in that as a child, apart from I was sent to boarding school, but I was always, if you see that as a child being done, and I saw Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor and Night to Remember and films like that being shot on the back lot of Pinewood as a boy, cycling around the back lot of Pinewood when the world was free and easy. And I got infected by the idea of cinema. And I've been, it got me, the idea and the enjoyment and the joy and the pleasure of being able to learn how to make films. And I was very lucky.
A lot of people say they were lucky. I sometimes feel like when you've put in thousands and thousands of hours into something, it's more than luck.
No, but it is. But it's people ask me what's the movie business been like, and it's better than work. It's a very, whatever area, it's very, because it's passion, and it's just something which involves literature, an idea, architecture, photography, technique, technical side, music. So many disciplines involved with the film that a producer, if they're like me, are deeply involved with. It encompasses so much of interest. And then a lot of the films that I make are about things that are very interesting in very interesting places. And it sort of educated me. Somebody who left school at 17, hopeless. Headmaster and my father said, "Your boy should leave the school. He's hopeless." And I left 17, and I started working. with a sort of recalcitrant to be learning things. And then I started wanting to learn things, desperate. And I had very good teachers. I had very good teachers like my dad initially, and then Ken Loach and Ray Harryhausen, and then Scott Marty, Nick Rogue, and all these teachers I had who I was absorbing so much from these people. And I was lucky to be working with. That's what I say. Lucky. I was, working with those sort of people is life enhancing, and I've got to work with all those incredible filmmakers over the decades, and I'm still at it. I'm still at it with the same ideology behind my original films. I haven't really got cynical about it.
Can you talk about obviously when you were being raised and you were on the set and you saw firsthand what it was to make a film, and what aspects of it turned you on as a young person? What is there a side to or an aspect of the filmmaking process that it really reached to?
It's very awe-inspiring being on a film set, because everybody's under discipline. Everybody is under the director's control. Everybody behaves. Everybody in front of the camera doesn't behave. Everybody behind the camera has to behave like a surgeon in an operating theater. And going on a set like that, you get respect for what's happening with this incredible equipment. Amazing equipment, and those days very impressive looking machinery, and now it can be a small handheld camera, but it was all giant stuff to a boy, and it was glamorous. It was glamorous, and it was film stars were not available. They were secret. They released what they wanted to release. Nothing was released without. There was nobody with phones photographing film stars of real film stars. And they were rare, and they were only available very, very large on the big screen. And there were no chat shows and personal shows. And there was a sort of a mythology that was about the cinema business, when it's all now very available. And it was going to the movie house, queuing for the cinema with your group of friends. It's a secret society, like I really enjoyed in the past going to buy an album of your latest record, and you open the gatefold and the lyrics were there, and you take the record out of its sleeve and you put it on the record player, and you'll be with 5 of your best friends, and you'd smoke a joint and you'd listen to that record, and you'll be handing around the sleeve notes to each other. You play the record 6 times. Now that was special pleasure, which is gone. Not just something, you don't even get a CD now. You don't even get the sleeve notes, and it's a bit like the movies. I think that the way we watch films, me too, because that's the way we can watch it and do watch it, it's been reducted to the experience and the enjoyment of what we had. It's like watching an opera on television. It's like when it was the best, you were in the darkened room with the strangers around you,
the lights would dim, and you felt a sense of excitement.
You paid your ticket and you went in there, and you were often transported. And I, as a youth, I was interested, because I'd been turned on to by my friends at the time into world cinema, age 17, and I was going to the National Film Theatre in London and going to see these films. And therefore I was traveling around the world. I was in the music room with Sergio Bray, then I was in Rashomon, then I was in a film in Africa from Sembene, or then I was around the world seeing these places, being told these stories, visual stories by masters. You smelled the place, you saw the place, you saw the food, you saw everything, and you traveled. And by the time I had gone to work in Japan and Italy and and the French New Wave, and then of course America, which we got continual exposure to, from Cagney to Dick Stewart to the Preston Sturges movies and Humphrey Bogart and everything. We've been in, we've been all over society, from high society to low society. And we will watch Peckinpah films, and we watched independent cinema of the 70s, and we saw Hal Ashby, and we saw Jonathan Demme, and we saw all these Scorsese, and we went and ran in queue for Nick Road performance, and we queued for Kubrick films, and we always something which I think it's the same, but it's different in terms of, I suppose, the lingua franca today. When you go out,
Lost your audio. I've lost your audio. Hold on. That seems like a nightmare. Oh, wait. I think I hear you again.
am I back? Am you back? Am I back?
You're back. I'm sorry.
Okay,
The lingua franca of today.
Yeah, so, and I'm included. I'm not saying that I'm not included. You go out to a meal, you go and meet people for a coffee, and where you would be talking about the latest Pedro Almodovar, or did you see this in the movie house? No, we talk about what you've seen, recommend on streaming, whether you saw this or that, or what you saw, as a shared experience, because the shared experience of watching movies is very rare now. You have to be with a cinema rat to share the experience of going to see the movies, not the big epic, not the. I'm not talking about Marvel and multiverse films, which is a sort of general diet of the cinema, which keeps the cinemas alive. I mean, was talking more, and even those repertory houses today, to stay alive, they have to show popular films because the audience has dwindled for the films that I've been making, and I'm still making them, but it's the truth, and I still love making the films. But when I look back at a lot of the films that I've made in the past, I couldn't make them today. I can't make them today. I have to discount a lot of stories that I want to tell because there are not enough resources to tell a story like that anymore. And I can give you some of my best films. Yeah, a lot of the films, they're just unapproachable today. Crash, Naked Lunch, going to tell a story, The Last Emperor with No Stars, Epic in China, Crossing the Desert. And you wouldn't make them the same way anymore. You'd make them with the help of a computer and technicians, and you don't go to Forbidden City anymore. Anyway, it wouldn't let you in there anyway. But I mean, you couldn't. We went there when you saw 1,000 people, 5,000 people. They were there, and they were dressed, and they got there at 2:00 in the morning to start assembling to be in these scenes. And it was a sort of like an unbelievable adventure, all this stuff. And it sounds romantic, but there it is. There was no fakery involved. When you saw the camels in the desert, the camels were in the desert. We were there too, in the middle of the Sahara, under canvas, And that's the way David Lean made Lawrence of Arabia, all those other epic films he made, and you made them like a Boy Scout, like army. You were like the army. You were reliant on, and people could die. You were in the Sahara. You were at the top of mountains in Bhutan. You were in the back of beyond in China with no safety nets. The films that I did in Africa, there are no safety nets, and some of the world which we dealt with was so exciting. And I had to communicate by telex. There was no phone line. The fax hadn't existed. I was in Morocco. I remember no money on bad timing at all. And I couldn't get through to London. And I couldn't we were there. We couldn't leave. We couldn't pay the bills. Things happened like that. The communications are so good now that nothing like that happens. And those sort of adventures that I had Desert Island with David Bowie. Nobody went there. He couldn't get there. Rarotonga. There was not even a port. People, equipment had to be lighted in. There was no even harbour there. But we shot that film there in the perfect place. And never for film crew, I probably never had one before or since. But it was in New Zealand tax hill, and you have to follow the money. And I could find the money in a place, and they counted it New Zealand, and it was tax money to make the film. I mean, it was a part that funded the film, was shooting in this incredible place, but was lucky for the film.
Clearly, that is a fond memory for you because you're smiling when you tell that story.
Most of the stories I'm smiling about. Most of the stories, and anyway, the bad things that happen on your film, you don't really dwell on the bad things. You think about the best of it, and then they fade, and it becomes sort of warm feeling, the whole experience. And I've seldom fall out with my that I work with. I get a multiple film with most of the directors I work with. I love actors. I like the interaction with people. It's very satisfying. And at the end of it, there's now I'm in my 70s. I look back and I've got these things which are constant, and they haven't got less into a barrel of streaming. Like they've managed to be, they're shown. I restore them, and they're shown all over the world all the time in retrospectives and special screenings and film festivals, and they sort of live in another way still in the darkened room. And it's not only romance, it's commerce, because that's one of the only places you can show films anymore, in festivals and special events.
Yeah, and I guess it is fortunate that there are so many festivals, and they seem to continue, because it is for many of these smaller art films or independent films, a means of distribution for them in many cases. But how did you we're talking today because of this documentary, The Storms of Jeremy Thomas, and I'm wondering how were you familiar with Mark Cousins? Because I fell in love with this man's storytelling style and his voice. He captured my imagination, and then I finally, right after the pandemic began, I got him on my show, this show, and it was like all I did. It was like a dream come true, Jeremy. And I'm wondering how that developed with you, and what do you think when did he approach you and say, I want to make this film about you, and what was your response to that?
Well, if you like cinema, you love Mark Cousins, because
Exactly.
he's
Sure.
his story of film. I recommend anybody who's listening to the show to buy his 12-part film, the story of film. It's poetic, it's explanatory, it puts you all the links, it explains how it's progressed. It's an essential viewing. 12 hours. If you watch the 12 hours and you focus on it, you understand everything. So he was a fan of he was director of a film festival, and he's was a big cinema fan with the shows and writing about films. I'm talking about the 80s, and he saw Bad Timing, and he was the ultimate fan of Bad Timing.
Me too.
I've been following Mark Cousins. I've met him, and I liked him very much, and he's a very, very sympathetic character. And again, he loves films, and he knows a lot more about cinema than me, not in the making it, but in the knowledge. He really knows a lot more,
right,
than probably anybody. So his producer David Kelly, I probably worked with a producer called David Kelly, and I don't know really who said, I did this road trip. I've done this road trip, and it's quite well known internally in the film business. I do the road trip to Cannes every year in a car. I love driving. I love cars, and I like driving across France. Of course, who wouldn't? It's paradise.
Now, where do you start from?
I want to start from my house in the cottage in the film, and it's where I live, in the countryside, in the fields, in the thatched house. Then I leave in a car, and I drive to Dover, get in the train, go in the tunnel. In fact, this time I went on the boat with him because it was more cinematic. We went on the ferry, get off the ferry, and then start driving. and wherever takes your fancy across this beautiful country with rivers and fields and pretty good places to stop to have a feed.
Yeah, I bet.
Nice glass of wine. And I do a sort of ad hoc journey with a rough idea. I think I'll go west, this time I go east, and then I go this. And I know that I have to end up 4 days later in Cannes. Then I drive across the country, stopping and talking and thinking and looking and visiting, like with Marthe Corbusier Church, Monument, Valley, something amazing to look at.
Mhm.
And I think that it started to come with you in the car with a camera and film this film. It's a road movie. It's a real road movie. It was a road movie, and I thought, well, that's good. I don't want to make some academic film about, oh, well, you get a budget and then you go and you find money and then you go and find a camera and then you go and find a film location and then you go and find the actors and then you edit the film. Everybody knows about that. I mean, anybody can tell you that story. And I thought, well, that's okay. Let's see what he does with me, because I trusted him. And that's what happened. And he got some truths out of me. A lot of things I didn't know I'd talked about. Just talked. And he did that. And it came out like that. And then I saw it at Cannes, showed him at Cannes, official selection. And he obviously likes me. And it was and the people around me liked me. And it was pleasant. I mean, I'm glad it wasn't, he didn't like me. I'm glad he liked the films.
Yeah.
And there's this sort of portrait, I suppose, of a certain moment in the 10 days or a week of my life, and talk about films and talk about desires and needs and old films and the love of old films and what makes us breathe. We live a breathe through cinema and cinema references, and even it's like me, when we see something, it reminds me. When we talk about Jeanne d'Arc, we think of Dreyer's film and Falconetti. When we talk about Sam Peckinpah, or when we talk about
What do you think about when you talk about? What do you think about when you talk about Sam Peckinpah? Which one?
Well, I talk about a lot of his films, but I would often bring up Emilio Fernandez, this incredible actor, a Mexican actor, who in fact once threw a critic through a plate glass window in Acapulco Film Festival for a bad review. And he was somebody who was a legendary figure. Emilio Fernandez is a Mexican director. And he was a sort of super macho. And I like that character in the film. And
was it Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia?
Yeah, I like Bring Me the Head of Jerry Garcia. No, I mean Jerry Garcia.
Yeah, I know you like that too.
Alfredo Garcia, to my heroes. And Alfredo Garcia was a wonderful film. I like it very much. Warren Oates, top of the line. And he was a counterculture guy, and he was a bit like in the spirit of what I'd like to be. Sam was of that ilk. And I watched him work, in fact, on Cross of Iron at Elstree Studios. Yeah, he was some sort of wild man. And we miss his films, let's face it. I mean, these filmmakers go and nobody replaces them, because you haven't got a replacement, really. And you haven't got a replacement for many of these wonderful filmmakers. I mean, the wit of Billy Wilder, the magnificence of Kubrick, the sophistication of Lubitsch, etc. Those are things for film lovers. It makes us our heartbeat. It makes our heartbeat. And when we mention Lubitsch, and when we know film, you know what you're talking about. And then this is a bit, and then there was a bit like that. Just smelled a bit of that. Yeah, do you remember that scene? We're in that crazy. We're mad. We're nuts. Because these are our references and our terms of references. And it's when you get so diseased in this business, but it's a nice disease. It's not a disease,
right.
But if I can contage people, I will. I mean, the film directors. Well, the film director's position is very different today than it was when I started in the film business. And the film business was led by film directors. They were the ones that counted because you recognized by the film director what sort of film you were going to see. You were going to see Hal Ashby film. If you were going to see, in the past, Hitchcock
Bernardo
film,
Bertolucci.
Yeah. Or Bernardo Bertolucci or Martin Scorsese or all the people who we hold dear. You know what roughly you're going to see Jim Jarmusch film. You know roughly the area that you're going to be enjoying. Yeah, they move different stories, but it's their personality is so strongly in the film. And it's like an art lover looking at paintings. They recognize painters at brush strokes. You recognize the brush stroke. When you hear records, the people listening to that, when you hear Eric Clapton play, or Bob Dylan sing, or Jimmy Page, his guitar, or whatever, David Gilmour's guitar versus Roger Waters' guitar, you hear them playing. You recognize them playing. You hear, Mark Knopfler, you recognize his guitar style just from hearing it. So if you know about the movie business, you recognize a lot of style from either somebody copying or emulating other directors, but the director itself. And of course, Bertolucci's style, for example, was very, very, the way that he moved his camera and the way that he did the lighting and the way he made his films with Storaro. They were very particular and much copied eventually. And I think a lot of directors of the Nouvelle Vague, the 70s Nouvelle Vague of American independent cinema, post sort of late 60s, they admired Bertolucci's way with the camera. And
actually, I was lucky enough to also get Bertolucci. That's the last name I'll drop. Bertolucci also on his last film did this podcast. Can you imagine? I didn't know.
I miss him. I miss him the most. I miss him the most.
Yeah.
I had a very, 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 very great friendship, and
yes,
was
The Last Emperor.
6 foot.
Brilliant.
The Last Emperor, the Sugar, A Little Buddha, Stealing Beauty, Dreamers, and and there was this. It's very nice finding a relationship. My dad had a producer called Betty Box, who was a woman producer, very, very esteemed, and produced something like 60 films. And she was his producer all his life, all his life. She knew exactly how he needed and what he wanted. And they were a team, and I was a very good team with Bernardo. We were very, very good working together because we were very complimentary in the way what we did and how we enjoyed the films. Enjoyed the films, and it was a long journey in very exotic places with cameras and a group of people, traveling players, and the crew. My
goodness, Jeremy or Mr. Thomas, I honestly I feel like we barely scraped the surface, and I would love you could be my eternal guest, and we'd never get, first of all.
I love it. My people who work with me, they have to listen. In fact, both of them is laughing. They have to listen because we talk about it, and I come up with an anecdote, unbelievable anecdotes about.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Whoever.
Of course.
Every film.
Brando.
Every film had a story. Brando, Gene Hackman, Nicholson, Hop.
Right.
Amazing. I mean, but really, in their primes, and those sort of things that are your private memories, and I've never written a book, and I don't know how, but I'm thinking of maybe I should just tell a few anecdotes from each film and try because I've got very funny anecdotes.
Oh, I bet.
Mainly very funny, and when I enjoy telling them. And then I sort of move them around a bit, retell the story.
I wish
enjoy the story to people.
I wish you would. I wish you would write that book. And by the way, there are editors that would help you with that too. And I would buy that book in a heartbeat. And then I would also be able to hopefully get you back on to talk about that book.
Okay.
So I'm going
Well, it's
to
a pleasure
impress
to
upon
talk
you
about
to.
you.
What's that?
It's a pleasure to talk with you. And of course, in America, there are still, I've been a bit rude maybe with audiences on this podcast, but we need the audiences, and the American audiences are mighty fine.
Are you?
There's the general audience, but there's special audiences here. And when I go around the country and I go to film festivals and I go to places, there's the strong love of it. I mean, I'm just trying to defend my space, but there's a real love here.
Yeah.
For cinema and an understanding of it. And I think a sorrow for a lot of us that it's not as healthy as we'd like it to be for various reasons. And the pandemic, of course, was the final blow. That has been very, very hard for very, very hard for cinemas to keep it going. Yeah.
Well, the name of the documentary that is about cinema, and you're kind of the tour guide in this case, is called The Storms of Jeremy Thomas, and it is directed by the great Mark Cousins, who I hope will also do this show in the next few days. And it's going to be, are you in New York City right now?
I'm in a very nice hotel with a nice little terrace, very windy, and I can see the Empire State Building.
You are in New York City. Yeah. I figured you were in the East Coast. New York City. Yeah, I figured you were because the sun is on your face.
Well, I was in Toronto. Yeah, I was in Toronto,
TIFF.
And then I drove from Toronto here. TIFF. I drove from Toronto in a car, and I got here on Sunday. I had a very nice drive through Saratoga Springs, and
oh yeah, I was just there myself. I live a little south of there these days. Another maybe hour south of Saratoga Springs, but halfway maybe I don't know to New York City. But did you get to see the Stop Making Sense? The new print or what?
No, I haven't seen. No, I haven't seen the print, but I love Stop Making Sense. And David Byrne has been a good colleague from The Last Emporer and on Young Adam.
Oh yes, of course. Oh sure.
And David Mackenzie's first feature with Hugh McGregor and Tilda in it.
Yeah.
And very fun. I like the film a lot. It's not been seen a lot, but it's a very good film. Young Adam.
Oh well, I'm going to chase after you to do this again because I would love to get more into the weeds with you, absolutely. And but I just want to say you're in New York City because The Storms of Jeremy Thomas is premiering at the Quad on the 22nd, which I guess is this Friday, and you will be there obviously to greet your audiences there and to do Q&A.
I'm going to do Q&A with Michael Barker. Michael Barker, who is really a great cinephile and very knowledgeable, as diseased as me, about the movie business.
I was trying to remember. For which there is no vaccine necessary. Who needs a vaccine for that?
I can tell you something. I wouldn't insult anybody.
Okay. This has been such a treat. I really appreciate your carving out the time. I really do. Thank you so much.
No, I loved it, and I hope people can enjoy the movie and the retrospective, which is on some of the incredible movies which I did over the past. And they're all restored nicely, beautiful looking.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Well, thanks again.
Thanks a lot. Very nice
to talk.
Thank you.
Same here. Have a lovely evening.